Thank you so much, Ms. Wells, and thank you to all of our honored guests who have joined us today to present two fantastic bills. I will now call the meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee to order for Tuesday, March 16th, 2021, and ask the esteemed secretary to please take the roll.
Vice Chair Cannizzaro.
Here.
Senator Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Harris.
Here.
Senator Settlemyre.
Here.
Senator Hansen.
Here.
Senator Pickard.
Here.
Chair Scheibel.
Here. So we have everybody here on the committee. We also have with us our committee analyst, Patrick Guinan from LCB, and our committee counsel, Nicholas Anthony, is not present in the meeting room, but he remains available to us to answer any legal questions that might arise during the meeting. And as you have heard me say several times now, he is very busy drafting legislation for us. So we are appreciative of his service, even though it is not here in this room right now. And with that, I think we are ready to move on to our very first bill hearing today. We will be taking SB 177 first. We have the Honorable Senator Julia Ratty with us to present, and I will turn it over to you. The hearing is now open on SB 177.
Let's try that again. Thank you, Chair Scheibel. I appreciate very much the opportunity to present in Senate Judiciary today a bill that I think has incredible importance. I just have to make my standing joke that I definitely try to stay out of the Committee on Judiciary without legal counsel, but I'm going to try to do it by myself today. So just hoping you all will be a little bit kind, and I brought an army of folks to help answer some questions. So again, my name is Julia Ratty. I represent Senate District 13, which is sort of the middle of Reno and Sparks. And I'm here today to present SB 177, which is a bill to help us develop more resources to address the dual challenges that our state faces to domestic violence and to sexual violence. I wanted to start our presentation by introducing to you former Lieutenant Governor Sue Wagner. This is the 40th anniversary of a bill that Lieutenant Wagner championed when she was a senator in the legislature 40 years ago to create the mechanism that we use to provide some funding support for domestic violence and sexual violence programs today. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lieutenant Governor Sue Wagner.
Thank you very much. Chair Shelby, in 1980, I read a book called Battered Wife. I couldn't believe it. And what happened, I'd never heard of it before. I called CAW, which at that time, Committee to Aid Abused Women. It is now called Domestic Resource Center. So in the next session of the legislature, I introduced a bill in 1981, and CAW, the Committee to Aid Abused Women, sent me an intern named Jan Evans, who subsequently became an assemblywoman, but she was there in 81 to help me get this bill through, dealing with domestic violence and attaching a fee onto every marriage license in the state. And we found out that a very powerful lobbyist, probably the most powerful lobbyist in our state's history, was representing our opponent, wedding chapels. And so Jan and I went to him and asked if he could help us. Well, he did. He called the wedding chapel people and told them they'd have to get somebody else to lobby for him because he was going to help these little ladies, I think is the expression he used, to help get this bill through. And with his success, and ours, I would say our success, we were able to get the bill passed. And actually at that time, the money was going to be used for building shelters, because I happen to know a woman here in town who was married to a banker, the president of a major bank. And when she heard about this bill, she called me. I did know her in a different way. and she told me she was one of these. I couldn't believe it. And I think I've known for the last 40 years a number of women in this situation. Some have left, some have not. And I think this is really important. In addition to in addition to domestic violence shelters, we are adding sexual assault. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. That gives you a little bit of background of why this bill and how it got to be initially. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And I think we will get through the presentation, so please stay with us because there may be some questions for you as we wrap up our presentation. So
Okay.
I'm going to take a minute here and share my screen. There, can you see the screen? Have we been successful with sharing the PowerPoint?
Yes, Senator, it is sharing just fine.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, now can I successfully move a slide? So that's the history. 40 years ago in 1981, SB 371 passed both houses by overwhelming margins, establishing a surcharge on every marriage license sold to fund domestic violence services. Just to keep the history going, that bill was supported by Senator Neal, who has a child serving in the legislature now, Senator Bilbray, who also has descendants serving in the legislature now, and Senator Raju had broad bipartisan support. So it's been a huge success. The way it works is that these funds accrue in the account for the aid for victims to domestic violence. Over the past 40 years, those grants have fostered the growth and development of domestic violence programs from 5 in 1981 to 14 in 2021. And the reason for that is this funding source doesn't cover all of the need, but it does get these organizations the base funding that they need that they can leverage against other funding sources to be able to build out their services. There's no question that these survivors continue to need support. According to the 2019 Nevada Uniform Crime Report, we are still experiencing one domestic violence offense every 17 minutes, a protection order issued every 37 minutes, one rape every 4 hours and 8 minutes, and 2,116 rape cases. Just 27.6 of those have cleared, meaning the offender was taken into custody. That's the lowest clearance rate of any felony reported. So the need is great. This is still a significant issue for our state of Nevada. And the impact, not just on the survivor, but also on society is tremendous. So for those of you who've worked with law enforcement or in regular contact with law enforcement, you'll know that these are some of the most dangerous calls that they respond to. Nationwide, officers were responding to domestic violence calls more than any other, and it was more than any other firearm-related fatality. 16% of all of the murders in 2019 were intimate partners. In 2018, we had the 7th highest rate of murders of women by men, and all but one of those was somebody that they knew. And in 2020, the cities of Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Henderson alone had 7,000 domestic violence court cases. The numbers are astounding. So that's the need. We have a growing need for domestic violence and sexual violence services. And when the bill was originally established, again, to the history of the bill, there was only one sexual violence organization in the state, and that organization was in Clark County. So there was a carve-out created, and as the bill still stands, 40 years later, the only revenue going to sexual violence is going to Clark County. That means 16 out of 17 counties are not getting any base resource from the state for sexual violence services, or services for survivors of sexual violence. So I know a lot of you have already looked at this bill and you know the dollar amount increase that we're asking for, but that's a big reason is why. We have left out 16 out of 17 counties when it comes to a particular part of this program. On the resource side, marriage licenses are plateauing. That's while the population is growing, and the fee income, because typically what we do in the legislature is we put a dollar amount into statute, doesn't change or adjust for inflation. So they haven't had an increase for quite some time. So again, just talking about the growth of domestic violence in Nevada, you can see that it's been significant. Between 2012 and 2019, it rose by 21%. And I apologize for the missing dot there. There was 1 year where the data wasn't completely collected and so therefore couldn't be reported. And again, those are just the reported cases. We know when it comes to domestic violence and sexual violence that there's significant underreporting. So just as an example of that, the purple line is the reported number of cases of domestic violence in our state. The orange line is the number of victims that have been served by the agencies that I'm here to represent today. You can just see, just by that alone, there's a significant delta between the number of cases reported and the number of folks who are coming in to ask for services. So sometimes it's hard to quantify need. This is the best information that the domestic violence programs have for what the need is and then what the unmet need is. So every year they do a count. And so the last count was on September 10th of 2020, and 14 of the programs in Nevada reported as part of this national one-day count that happens across the nation. So in our count, 501 victims were served, and that broke out to some that were in shelters, some that received non-residential counseling, legal advocacy, children's programming, and hotlines. On that same day, there were 32 unmet need requests for services. And here's the critical point, 29 of those were for shelter. So that is on that day, a person who had experienced domestic violence, who was seeking a way out and seeking shelter, who was not able to be accommodated. If you annualize that number for just that one day, that would be 10,585 shelter bed nights that could not be provided with our existing resources. In 2018, we were unable to meet 50% of the shelter requests. In 2019, it was 37%. And by 2020, it was 22%. So we're making some progress, but still, that's 1/5 of survivors who show up and are not able to be accommodated. And when we can't accommodate them, then these programs get creative and they look for things like motels or emergency shelters, which actually cost more money. So the more that we can do to build that base infrastructure, the more cost efficient we can be, the more survivors we can serve. And what we know is if we can deal with the crisis, get somebody stable, then we have a much higher likelihood of moving that survivor into a path of breaking the cycle. But if we can't get them stabilized, it's very difficult to do. At the same time, there has been an astounding growth in sexual violence. Between 2010 and 2019, we're talking about a 93% increase. 93%. And again, the only county that is eligible to benefit from the marriage license fee in our current statute is Clark County. The other 16 counties do not receive any of this resource for sexual violence. Meanwhile, on the resource side, the blue bars here are the marriage licenses sold. So you can see from 2010 to 2015, they were slowly declining. In 2016, 2017, I'm sure some of you will be able to figure out pretty quickly why we had a bump. We had some changes in our laws and a whole group of LGBTQ folks were able to get married now. And so there was probably some pent up demand. We saw a bump in marriage licenses, but you can see after that pent up demand has worked its way through, we're starting to see that plateauing again. You may be wondering about 2020 specifically with the pandemic and the shutdowns and what has happened with marriage licenses. And you can see from this graph, there's a significant drop off in April when the economy was closed and we had stay-at-home orders in place. But you can see that it has rebounded significantly. And it's a little bit difficult to see because it's kind of crazy how consistent it is. But there's a pink line here between January and February that is the 2021 results. And they match almost exactly the 2019 results. So by all accounts, we have made it through the drop off, the pent up demand, and we're sort of leveling back out to normal rates of people applying for marriage licenses. The big piece here that I referenced earlier is that we're losing purchasing power. So every day that the rate doesn't go up, but there's inflation, that dollar just doesn't stretch as far. And so between 2010 and 2020, our cost of living increased by 18.4%, but the rate going to domestic violence shelters stayed the same. They haven't had a raise in 11 years. So SB 177 is our response to that. It's the 40th anniversary. We're building off of the good work that was done by people like Lieutenant Governor Sue Wagner, Assemblywoman Jan Evans, to try to make the case again that we need a significant increase. We don't need just a modest increase to be able to make up for inflation. We don't need just a little bump that might be able to help with some unmet need. We have to deal with inflation, we have to deal with unmet need, and we have to deal with the fact that 16 of the 17 counties don't have access to sexual violence services. So if we were to increase the surcharge by, I can say this, if we were able to increase the surcharge by $25, which is doubling it, but doubling the amount that goes to domestic violence, not the overall fee, but just the portion that goes to domestic violence and sexual violence, we would take the current amount of money that's raised from $2.6 million to $5.2 million. Of that money, 75% would continue to go to domestic violence services. This would allow for them to have an increase that would make up for some of that lost purchasing power due to inflation and the ability to start to make some impact on some of the unmet need. And 25% would go to sexual violence services across the state. And I want to emphasize here, right now, in our current state, these are the numbers of the grants for this year. Only $245,000 is going to sexual violence. That's compared to with that stat that I just told you, that 93% increase in sexual violence over the same period. So I assume that one of your questions are going to be, well, how much are folks paying for a marriage license now? So here are the current marriage license fees by county. You can see that 11 counties still have it at $60. There's one county at $65, 3 counties at $75, 1 county at $77, and 1 county at $80. You may recall that in the 2015 session, SB 395 authorized Clark County to add $14 to the marriage license fee, specifically for wedding tourism. So the fee was increased, but none of that went to domestic violence or sexual violence services. I think the hope was that marriage tourism would increase the number of folks getting married, and then there would be a subsequent bump in the amount of money going to the shelters and programs. So far, I think that's really good work that's happening. I'm not dismissing the good work that's been done by the folks in Clark County to really work on that. But it is not resulting in an increase in resources for domestic violence or sexual violence in our state. So, Madam Chair, with that, I'm prepared to walk you through the bill. It's a relatively simple bill, so I don't know if you need a detailed, if the committee would be interested in a detailed walkthrough of the bill. Or, and I know we were waiting for one presenter to get into the Zoom room. Has Crystal made it in?
I'm here.
Fantastic. So what I'd like to do at this point is turn it over to Crystal Miner, who is a survivor who would like to explain to you why these services are so important.
Good afternoon, everybody. As you know, or as it was said, I'm Crystal Miner. I'm currently a licensed social worker in the state of Nevada. 20 years ago, I was not a licensed social worker. I had very little education and 3 toddlers, 2 on my hips, 1 in a stroller when I left my abuser. The services that I received from advocates and from the sexual assault tremendously impacted my life. It taught me how to go from being a victim to being a survivor to being a good mother. And it taught me how to get confidence back in myself to pursue my career as the social worker that I am now. Without those services, I can't even imagine where myself or my children would be. Not only did they give me my confidence back to be a good parent and to have confidence in myself and learn that I was worth more than being treated less than dirt. The parenting classes helped tremendously. Even though I went through them multiple times, they were there, and I had that support from the agencies to give me that confidence to move forward and to better myself and to break that cycle. Myself, along with most victims, come from a pattern of abuse from when we're children. And up until the time that I had the courage to finally leave my abuser and go through the agency, I believe that I deserve that. I didn't know how to break that cycle, and they taught me how to do that. And I'm very grateful for those agencies. I don't know, like I said, I don't know where we would have been or what I would have done without them.
Thank you, Crystal. I very much appreciate you making the time to join us today. I know it's not easy to share these stories. So, to wrap it up, because I wanted to make, in watching this committee, I think you'll generally have questions. So I'm going to keep the committee short, the presentation short. There's lots of other information that we could share with you. Very compelling information about what happens to survivors and their path, the data about the growing need in our state, the reasons that the existing resource just has not been sufficient and will continue to not be sufficient. But with that, I wanted to let you know that with me today, I have, of course, Lieutenant Governor Sue Wagner, who you've heard from, and Crystal Miner, who's representing survivors. I also have Sue Maiske, who is the Executive Director of the, never get the name right, Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. I have Liz Ortenberger, who is the CEO of Safe Nest, which is one of the providers in Clark County. I have Denise Joxheimer, who's the Executive Director of the Domestic Violence Resource Center, who's here representing services in Washoe County. And I have Lisa Lee, who is the Executive Director of the Advocates to End Domestic Violence, who is representing rural communities generally. So they are all here as the subject matter experts to also be able to answer questions. And we are ready and prepared whenever you are, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really do believe it's a privilege to be here, to be able to represent survivors across the state and their needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Ratty. And I would also like to echo your thanks to Ms. Miner for sharing your story, and to everybody who took the time out of their schedule to be here to answer questions from our committee. I already see the hands going up. I will do my best to take you in the order that I saw them. And I believe the first hand I saw was Senator Hansen's. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The question I have, obviously, I don't think anybody's not going to support the program. The question in my mind is the funding mechanism. I mean, when this was started back in the 80s, to tax people that are getting married may have seemed appropriate, but as we've expanded this, and as your chart suggests, there's a whole lot of violence going on with people that have not got married. Yet people getting married are the ones that are expected to fund 100% of this program, it sounds like. I'm just kind of wondering why this shouldn't be turned over to the general fund to be funded through that type of a program rather than singling out one industry. An industry, I might add, by your charts shows a substantial decline as our population has expanded. So I'm just kind of wondering, why are we going to continue to single out the wedding industry when the problem obviously goes way beyond marriage?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Hansen.
You can go direct.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate the question, Senator Hansen. 40 years of history and multiple efforts to find some general fund or another funding source for these programs have not been successful. 40 years. We've been at this since 1981. So I would be thrilled to work with all of the members of this committee to identify a different funding source if we could get the support to make that happen. But 40 years of history will tell you that we have not been able to do that.
Oh, I can appreciate that. But I would say that, we have a male majority legislature for the first time in Nevada history. I would surely think that there would be strong support for some sort of funding mechanism, and I would support it. I just, my issue really is, obviously there's a need there. It's a great program. It helps people that really need it, but it just seems wrong to me to single out an industry that already is on the ropes to a certain extent and then add an additional fee on top of that. I mean, honestly, we should be encouraging people to get married. Your stats showing this constant expansion of social or sexual violence. At the same time, you see this on the marriage curve. There may be some relationships there that we should perhaps explore as well. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me these questions.
Absolutely. We will move next to Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, and Senator Hansen just asked my second question. So my first question is why the $25 increase? Why double the number? Was that suggested to be enough to adequately fund the program? Or was this just a number picked that, you know, we didn't feel like we could go higher than that? How did we come to $25?
Thank you, Senator Pickard, Senator Ratty, for the record. It's a great question. No, it doesn't come anywhere close to funding the need. So I just want to be very clear about that. What it does do is, if as you're trying to add the 16 counties that have zero sexual violence dollars right now, and as you saw, there's only 254,000 of the entire 2.6 million now that's going to sexual violence. If you're going to bring all 16 counties along, and you're going to make up for the inflationary costs that have been lost over the last 11 years, and you're going to get a little bump for everybody, that's how we end up at 25. And I have a detailed spreadsheet that I can bring by your office if you'd like to see it, but without getting towards that level, if you want to add sexual violence, you have to cut domestic violence, or you have to leave out those 16 counties, is the basic answer.
Sure, and that makes sense. I guess I share the thought that we seem to be targeting a diminishing source. And I think now would be an excellent time to establish a permanent funding source that adequately funds this. Frankly, I have a fair amount of experience with this kind of violence in my practice. I'd say probably 20% of my cases involve violence in one form or another. I've regularly supported just about everything Liz Ortenberger does. I think they've got a great program. I would like to see it triple in size, or for that matter, no limitation, but I would like to see us really take a good attack on this and get into the education piece, get into some of the work that deals with the sources and the problems, particularly when it comes to wrapping the kids that are exposed to these things with the services they need, so we don't continually repeat the cycles. And I just, I just hate to think that we're hurting an industry that we should be supporting, because as Senator Hansen suggests, I think that there probably is a correlation between sexual violence and the lack of marriage, because there doesn't seem to be that focus on commitment. So if there's an opportunity to amend this to add a permanent funding source and not put this on the backs of one industry that really has little to do with the violence problem, I would support that all day long. So that's not a question, that's a statement, but thank you for your indulgence, Chair Scheibel.
So Chair Scheibel, may I respond?
Please.
Thank you. So Senator Pickard, here's what I would say. I sit on the Finance Committee, several other folks sit on the Finance Committee. If we're talking about shifting general fund from some other critical program, we all know that we're talking about shifting it from K-12 funding, or we're talking about shifting it from services for people with disabilities or behavioral health or low-income families on Medicaid. And we are in the process of cutting all of those programs as we speak. So there really is not an opportunity to shift existing general fund. I am thrilled with the enthusiasm that the committee members are sharing with trying to find a permanent funding source for domestic violence and sexual violence. And if we can come to a place where we can get obviously the magic 2/3 number, or a majority or a unanimous decision on this is the place that we're all willing to dig in and find a new revenue source that will stabilize and support these programs going forward, I am all in. But in the absence of a recommendation for another funding source, this has been the funding source that has been foundational for these programs for the last 40 years, and it is eroding before our very eyes. And we're to blame because the legislature hasn't given them a raise in 11 years, and they haven't pulled in the other sexual violence programs since 1981, 40 years later. So please, all ideas are welcome. And if you have suggestions for revenue sources that we can get to that bipartisan collaborative vote on, I'm in.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would also encourage any members of this committee who have any kind of empirical data to suggest that marriage is less likely to result in domestic violence, or that the decline in the marriage rate is contributing to an increase in domestic violence, to please provide that information to the committee, because I think that would be fascinating and important for all of us to know if such a relationship actually does exist. And with that, we will move on to Senator Harris's question.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. I was wondering if there's any data that suggests raising this fee would actually lead to, let's say, a decline in marriages.
Thank you, Senator Harris, for the question. I think it's a great question. And I know that something that you and I share as maybe a hobby is an interest in behavioral economics to a certain degree. I don't have a study that shows what the magic number is where a marriage license fee is going to be the determining factor about whether or not somebody gets married. But I think from a common sense standpoint, if you do the research and show what an average marriage costs, what an average wedding, even what a low-end wedding costs today, and you look at the fee that we're talking about, $100 marriage license fee is not the deciding factor on whether or not somebody's going to get married. There are many other, even if we're talking about the tourism marriage economy, where we're asking people, they have to travel to Vegas. The price of gas is going to be more of a deciding factor. The price of the room that they have to rent when they get there is going to be more of a deciding factor. There are multiple things. Clearly, when we're talking about a wedding where folks are investing more, the dress, the flowers, all of those things. So I do not believe, on just a common sense standpoint, that another $25 on the marriage license fee is going to be the decision-making factor from a behavioral economic standpoint for anybody about whether or not they're going to get married. I'm sorry, I don't think I said Senator Ratty for the record that time.
Thanks, Senator.
And I will go next to Senator Settlemyer.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all support the idea of trying to get more money to this worthy program. It's just a question of where to do it. I've always struggled with this idea, even 10 years ago when we had legislation, because it creates a nexus. It makes you think that there's a relationship between marriage and violence. I just don't like that discussion. I don't think it's proper. What's the body think about the idea of doing $50? Because maybe we look at a different funding source. What about divorce? Wouldn't it be as problematic to think about a nexus with that? What if we did something in that realm? Or do we look at the idea of potentially a fine on individuals who are convicted of domestic violence? I don't know. I just was throwing that out there for a little bit of discussion to Senator Ratty, but what are your thoughts on some of those concepts?
Thank you, Senator Settlemyer. So I think, we've sort of gone down this path in earlier questions, but I think when we start talking about a fine on the person who's committed the domestic violence, I think we start wading into a territory that probably there are far more people on this call who are members of this committee are far more familiar than I am, where we start getting into criminal statutes, restitution, other victims structures where that money is more about going directly to that victim if there's been serious harm. And so I am the least qualified criminal justice person in the room by far, but I suspect that others on the committee would back me up on when you start talking about the perpetrator, there's a whole different structure, and it does not and it's not going to generate regular sustainable money that you can count on. And regular sustainable money that you can count on is the foundation of this money. There are other funds, federal funds, that these programs get, like VOCA, some of the federal funds, but they all require a 20% match. And that 20% match can't come from federal funds. So if they don't have this base funding to be able to do that, then they can't get that additional funding to round out their services. So this base funding is critically important. To the question of other funding sources, again, I'm open and I need some help from my colleagues to suggest something that they would be willing to vote for that would get close to replacing the amount of money that we're talking about here, which at the current time is $2.6 million and the ask is $5 million. And so again, if there are suggestions that folks are willing to vote for, I'm here for it. And I kind of get the discomfort, but what is a far more uncomfortable conversation is looking a victim in the eye and saying, we don't have a bed for you tonight. What is a far more uncomfortable conversation is holding a woman's hand while she's having a rape kit examination and then not having adequate services to provide her, to support her for the next 2 to 3 weeks while she's in crisis. So if we're talking about uncomfortable conversations, for me, the uncomfortable conversation is that we have victims who we want to be survivors that we are not able to support because we haven't been able to raise this revenue. And we haven't found a solution to a different revenue source for 40 years. So I appreciate the question, and I don't have other ideas because frankly, I have not come across another idea that I could get the votes to get across the finish line. I think I've been here advocating for other revenue sources for all kinds of things since the day I walked in the building. I'm not shy about asking for money, but I haven't been able to find anything else. And so at least what this source has is history, predictability, and it creates that base that these programs so desperately need.
Senator Stonemeyer, Senator Reddy, I appreciate that. I also find it disturbing that we have not made it a priority to take care of these people in previous budgets. It is disturbing. In that respect, I will gladly talk offline if you wish on the other sources. Maybe we need to look at some of the numbers that go with those sources. If we did a $25 fee assessment on divorces, what would that generate? Do we have more divorces in Nevada than we do marriages? Or, that's where we're going to have to try to find the numbers for you to figure out how to create these type of funds. Thank you.
All right, we will move to Senator Orenshaw's questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Ratty and Lieutenant Governor Wagner, for bringing the bill and you both of your long history of fighting on this issue. My question is for the advocates, if anyone cares to answer. With the pandemic, with so many of our tourism, or so much of our tourism industry shut down, casinos shut down, are you finding that domestic violence, anecdotally at least, that you're finding incidents have gone up? I know other parts of the country, I've seen statistics like that. I'm just wondering if any of the advocates have seen the need for these kind of services go up since the pandemic and all the damage that has happened to our economy.
Thank you, Senator Orenshaw, for the question. If I may, I'd like to start with Liz Ortenberger.
Hi, Liz Ortenberger for the record. I'm the CEO for SafeNest. We serve 25,000 clients a year with domestic violence. So the pandemic has been an interesting time to navigate. We saw initially, as you would expect, a huge spike in calls on the hotline at about 150% our regular capacity. Then that filtered into shelter. Shelter started to run at 150 to 200% of regular capacity. And now we're seeing that need within our court advocacy counseling programs, and correlating our batterers treatment program is overrun with space, and we don't have enough. So the pandemic has absolutely been a factor. There were gaps in service, large gaps in service before the pandemic, however, so I don't want this to feel like it correlates. The need for funding is clear.
Thank you, Ms. Ortenberger. Thank you, Chair.
And then perhaps we could have Lisa Lee talk about, because that's one end of the spectrum, that's the largest provider in the largest county, but perhaps Ms. Lee could talk about what she's experiencing. Ms. Lee, it looks like you're still on mute.
There you go. Yeah, because of our central location, we end up sheltering a lot of people from surrounding rural counties. There just isn't services out there. And last year, our shelter did 51% of the shelter clients that we had came from other shelters. Because of a lack of funding, Lyon County has lost their program altogether. They lost it a couple years back, and there hasn't been the ability to rebuild it. And so our shelter has been taking on Lyon County's clients. And then if you look all throughout the state, every rural county is stressed trying to come up with resources just to keep their shelter doors open. When you look at Vegas and you look at Washoe County, there's a lot more population there, but there's also more opportunities to raise funds there. When you start getting into the rural counties, we really don't have those same opportunities and the same resources. So when you look at the base, each one of us counties get roughly what, $23,000 is our base, and then you build on it according to population. So most programs are trying to run shelter and crisis lines on very, very little money. And this resource here will definitely help us. And it's not just the domestic violence, it's the sexual assault, where there's only a few of us in the state that are able to offer sexual assault assistance. And to be able to do that in every single county, that's imperative that we are able to do that. There's nothing worse than, I think, being in a small county and having to drive hours and hours to get any type of help. And this would ensure that there is something in every single county to be able to take a victim through the exam, into the police report, and into testifying. And as for COVID, we've all seen it throughout the state. And people are terrified of having to go into shelter. And you see that whenever you're admitting them, is that they would do anything rather than have to take a chance of going into shelter and maybe being exposed to other people. And I know our court advocates have worked really hard to be able to keep people in their home and through restraining orders, because they are so fearful of having to go and be exposed to other people who might have the ability to infect them. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Thank you, Chair. It sounds like this is very, very needed.
And finally, with your indulgence, Chair, the Sue Maiske would have the statewide perspective.
Thank you. For the record, Sue Maiske with the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. And I think in response to Senator Ornschell's question, it's been a roller coaster in terms of the number of folks that are calling and coming into shelter. I think the thing that we should really keep in mind as we think about this is folks were forced to stay at home with their abusers. They may not have been able to make a phone call to let anyone know that they needed help. They may not have been able to leave that home in order to go to shelter or to get any kinds of services. So we saw increases in number of folks coming to programs last year. We saw increases particularly in hotline calls, and we saw increases across the board in shelter bed nights. But I think the thing that we are most concerned about is how many people were unable to access services and what's going to happen when we do open up. I think Liz, talked about that, seeing the hotline calls, the shelter now counseling and other kinds of services, that we will be overwhelmed because people will be looking for a way out, and we want to provide it, but I'm not sure that we have the resources to respond to all the people that need services.
Thank you, Ms. Maiske. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the members of the committee? All right, then. We will move on to testimony. I understand that in this case, we do have some people who are with us on the Zoom call who are here to answer questions, who would also like to give testimony. Here in Senate Judiciary, we do limit testimony to 2 minutes per person, and I generally allow BPS to determine the order, but since you guys are here in the Zoom, I will call on you basically at random. And so I got a list of those of you who want to testify, and I will ask Ms. Ortenberger to go first. You have 2 minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for hearing this bill today. And thank you to Crystal Miner for sharing her story. Whenever a survivor steps forward, that's a profile in courage. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO for SafeNest, and we serve over 25,000 victims of domestic violence each year. We work with victims, abusers, and children affected by the epidemic. We've placed exhibits for the bill in the proper place that show a survivor success story, as well as powerful statistics around our partnership with Metro. But SB 177 isn't about our size or our successes. SB 177 is about the victims we couldn't help because of the resource restrictions. It's about 504 victims and children that were not admitted to shelter in 2019 to 2020 fiscal year before COVID, because their violence did not score high enough on the lethality index. Victims like Martha, who was beaten in front of her 3 children by her husband, But because her abuse did not include a weapon or strangulation and happened more than 3 weeks before her call, and we were already operating at 120%, she did not meet the qualification. SB 177 is about the 500 calls each year that roll to our answering service because our crisis advocates are already busy on calls. And while victims leave a safe callback number, 20% cannot be reached. Victims like Ashley, who called, shared with us quickly that she'd been strangled, and when we tried to call her back at the safe to call number, we were unable to reach her. Victims who have strangulation as part of their domestic violence are 750% more likely to be victims of homicide. Most importantly, SB 177 is about ending the epidemic of domestic violence. 76% of children who grow up in domestic violence households will repeat the cycle as victim or as batterer. SB 177 increases the dollars available for prevention work. For an additional $25, Senators, you can be part of ending the epidemic of generational domestic violence, housing victims like Martha and her 3 children, and answering the phone the first time a victim of strangulation calls. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move next to Ms. Lee.
Hi. As I said, that last year, 51% of our shelter bed nights were provided to victims and their children from counties other than Carson City. The majority of the victims were from rural counties that had no place else to turn. They did not want to leave their communities, but the lack of bed space made it necessary. The increase in marriage license fee is needed to ensure that rural counties have the resources necessary to meet the needs in our community. Most rural counties are not in a financial position to use these additional funds for innovative services as much as we'd like to. They are needed to keep the shelter doors open and the crisis lines operating. A recent result of a lack of funding was the closure of the only domestic violence program in Lyon County. Victims from Lyon County now must rely upon surrounding rural counties for crisis intervention and resources. They're not allowed to stay in their own county for the services that they need. Not only are these funds needed to ensure that domestic violence services are available, but they're also, for the first time, will provide crisis intervention for sexual assault victims throughout the state of Nevada. These funds will ensure that victims have an advocate with them during the entire process that they go through after an assault. Rural counties throughout Nevada struggle to meet the financial cost of operating services for victims. Marriage license fees provide the foundation for our funding. And if we are to continue to meet the needs of victims in the state as we grow, we need an increase in this foundation of our resources. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move next to Ms. Yoxheimer.
Thank you. And I am one of 2 staff members from the Domestic Violence Resource Center who's providing testimony today. Thank you for this opportunity. Our organization, as along with the organizations both in Clark County and the rural counties, has experienced a significant increase in the need for services during the pandemic. But as was outlined by others, the needs even beyond the pandemic are significant and such that we are struggling to meet the needs of folks in our community. Last year, we provided services to more than 10,000 contacts to individuals in our community and received more than 7,000 volunteer hours to help us provide those services. With a staff of 9 full-time staff members, we are hard pressed to meet the needs of all of those individuals who seek our services, and agree with Liz and Lisa and others that the individuals who we are not able to serve are those individuals who we are have the greatest concern about. So thank you so much for hearing this bill, and we appreciate your support of SB 177.
Thank you. And we will next go to Ms. Maiske.
For the record, Sue Maiske, Executive Director of the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. I'm going to keep my remarks very, very short. You've heard from the experts, starting with Crystal, Liz, Lisa, and Denise. These are the folks that understand what the issues are, what the needs are. It's my great privilege to work with programs all across the state to try to develop programming, to develop resources, to find funding from wherever we can. And I am excited to hear that people are willing to dig in and figure out other kinds of funding sources to make sure that resources are available for survivors of both domestic and sexual violence all over the state. We promise to be your partner in doing that, but we also ask for your support of SB 177. It is critical. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that concludes everybody who is on the Zoom call. So we will now go to broadcast for anybody on the phone line wishing to testify in support of SB 177.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 177, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Senate Bill 177, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 196, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. I'm Eric Spratley, ERICSPRATLEY. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association here in support of Senate Bill 177. We appreciate Senator Ratty presenting this important bill today and your regular support for the survivors of domestic and sexual violence across the entire state of Nevada. We thank the committee for considering this bill. Thank you, Chair Scheibel.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 666, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Warren Hardy, W-A-R-R-E-N, last name Hardy, H-A-R-D-Y. I'm a contract lobbyist for the city of Mesquite, Nevada. While Mesquite City Council has not had an opportunity yet to vote on this and endorse it as a piece of legislation, I was asked by Councilwoman Sandra Raymaker to call and express her support for this legislation as a member of the Mesquite City Council, and she looks forward to continuing to work on this important piece of legislation. Wanted me to pass my appreciation on to Senator Ratty and the committee for bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. If you've recently joined our call this afternoon, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 177. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 648. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is John Jones, J-O-H-N-J-O-N-E-S, here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association, and we are in support of SB 177. This bill helps fill a critical need for victim services throughout the state. Whether it's marriage fees or another funding stream, ensuring that victims throughout the state receive these services is essential public policy, and we are in support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, if you've recently joined us, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 177. If you'd like to provide support testimony this afternoon, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller using the user 1 identification, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hi, Chair and members of the committee. This is Chuck Calloway, Director of Intergovernmental Services for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I just wanted the record to reflect that we are in support of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a final reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 177. If you'd like to provide support testimony, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 729. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Christy Oriole. It's Kristyoriol, and I'm the Grants Manager for Sierra Community Health. We are in full support of SB 177. We have submitted written testimony, but I wanted to highlight just a few points today. Our organization is the result of a July 1, 2019 consolidation of some organizations you may be familiar with: Tahoe Safe Alliance, Project Mana, the North Tahoe Family Resource Center, and the Family Resource Center of Truckee. Our mission is to connect and empower our community through family strengthening, crisis intervention, hunger relief, and legal services. In fiscal year 1920, 644 members of our community accessed domestic violence, sexual violence, child abuse, and prevention services from our organization. As for all of us, 2020 was a very difficult year, and the needs for services at Sierra Community House increased to a degree that was previously unfathomable. We experienced over a 200% increase in our helpline calls, averaging 150 calls per month, and over a 1,000% increase in requests for rental support. The shelter-in-place orders have impacted victims of violence in a unique and dangerous way. We're just now really beginning to see the impact that these necessary orders had on victims and their children, and funding for shelter and support services is more important than ever. COVID-19 already exacerbated an already challenging housing market in our region. Even prior to COVID-19, housing was very difficult to attain in our area. And now with people relocating from the Bay Area and many other places to our area, there's literally no houses to purchase, which has also impacted our rental prices and hence is impacting our most vulnerable community members and forcing many to move out of the area. It's also caused our organization to have to cancel our 2 largest fundraisers, which lost critical general fund dollars supporting administrative and direct services work. Marriage license funds provide a life-saving service to Nevada community members experiencing domestic and sexual violence. Funding for shelter services is more important than ever as the demand for services increase. Additionally, federal funds to the Victims of Crime Act are expected to decrease in the coming years, absent action by Congress to lift the cap on these funds. This expected decline will greatly impact service providers throughout the state in keeping survivors sheltered and safe. Increased marriage license funds could alleviate some of this and allow shelters to remain operational. This is the sole source of state funding for these services, and we believe SB 177 is essential. So we urge the full support of SB 177 to support the important legislation and send a strong message to survivors of domestic and sexual violence. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And if you've recently joined us, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 177. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 611. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is John Piro, Johnpiro, from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. We'd like to thank Senator Ratty for bringing this bill forward. We, too, believe that breaking the cycle and providing a stable funding source for survivors in need is essential, and that we haven't done enough of that in the state of Nevada. In our job, we often see that victims sometimes become victimizers, and we are for breaking that cycle. When we have a client, when we help them with their case, it's our goal to never see that client in county blues again, but to see them on to a better path in their life. And I think providing a stable funding source to get survivors treatment is essential to helping to break that cycle. And we're thankful for Senator Ratty for putting this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 372. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself and slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, Vice Chair Canizaro, and members of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you for allowing me to share my support of Senate Bill 177. My name is Melina Raymond, M-A-L-E-N-A-R-A-Y-M-O-N-D, and I am the HR and Compliance Manager for the Domestic Violence Resource Center in Reno. The proposed increase to the marriage license fee would provide critical support to our organization and many others across the state, and I urge you to support this bill. Since the last increase to the fee in 2009, we have seen significant growth in demand for domestic violence services in Washoe County. Unfortunately, we have recently seen a decline in the amount of marriage license funding available and severe cuts this year due to COVID-19. Marriage license funding allows the Domestic Violence Resource Center to fulfill our mission to rebuild safe and hopeful futures for victims of family violence. An increase to this funding would sustain the essential services we provide, such as emergency shelter, free bilingual counseling, a 24-hour hotline, transitional housing, temporary protection order assistance, and financial literacy coaching. This funding is crucial not only for its support of our services, but because it serves as a match mandated by many of our federal grants. Additionally, the Domestic Violence Resource Center depends on the flexibility of the marriage license funding. Unlike federal dollars, we can use these precious funds to support the administrative and operational expenses that keep our lights on and our doors open on a daily basis. Once again, thank you for your time this afternoon, and on behalf of the client, staff, and board of directors of the Domestic Violence Resource Center, I encourage you to support SB 177.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits, 144. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann McCown, M-A-R-I-A-N-N-E, last name M-C, capital K-O-W-N. I'm the Executive Director for the Committee Against Domestic Violence in Elko, Nevada. I have submitted a written letter to the legislators, but I wanted to highlight a few things about why SB 177 is important, especially to the rural counties. Committee Against Domestic Violence, also known as Harbor House, has served the Elko County community for more than 4 decades. We are the only domestic violence shelter for Elko, Eureka, and White Pine counties. For those that may not be aware, that's a geographical expanse that is about the same as the size of the state of South Carolina. I have myself and 6 staff to cover all 3 counties 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If it wasn't for the marriage license funds that we receive from the state, I don't think we would be able to provide these services. We are what is known as a dual agency. We help domestic violence victims and sexual violence victims. In fiscal year 2019-2020, CADV saw an increase of 7% for first-time domestic violence victims when compared with the fiscal year in 2018-19. We have also seen increases in victims who are sexual violence victims. This money would definitely help us. I know I listened in on the hearing, and in the rurals, when I tell people that when they go and get a marriage license and they pay a fee, they are usually pleasantly surprised that the money goes towards a service, goes towards helping victims of violent crimes, of domestic violence. And they actually have expressed to me that they like that it is a fee and not from tax dollars as far as in rural county. I'd just like to thank for your time for allowing me to speak, and please vote yes.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 177. If you'd like to provide support testimony this afternoon, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 104. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Greetings, members of the committee. My name is Maria Teresa Lieberman Barraga. That is Maria-Teresa. LIEBERMANN-PARRAGA. I'm here representing Nevada Board in Progress, and we are in full support of SB 177. And we really thank Senator Julia Ratty and all of the advocates and service providers for addressing this important issue. Domestic violence survivors risk everything, especially their lives, when they make the decision to escape their abusive situation. Many have nothing when they escape, and the least we can do is help the services that help these survivors escape, survive, and thrive. We need to get to a place where a survivor will not be turned away due to a lack of beds or resources. So please support SB 177, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 318. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary. This is Kendra Bertschy, Kendra Bertschy with the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. We want to thank Senator Ratty for bringing forward this bill. We've discussed at several legislative sessions now the need to enhance and increase victim services. As Mr. Pirro indicated, unfortunately, it is all too common for our clients to have suffered at the hands of an abuser themselves before then becoming involved in the criminal justice system as one of our clients. We believe that in order to really combat the issues with our criminal justice system and to succeed in criminal justice reform, we need to start funding our victim services. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 126. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and maybe.
Good afternoon. Thank you, members of the Judiciary Committee, for allowing me to speak. My name is Dr. Marie Wakefield, Marie, M-A-R-I-E, Wakefield, W-A-K-E-F-I-E-L-D. I speak in favor of SB 177. I want to come from a little different perspective. I'm a member of the Las Vegas Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I'm the chair of a domestic violence task force that provides a program called STOMP, which means Standing Together Opposing Misuse of Power. We lost a sorority sister to domestic violence, and because of this devastating atrocity, it's been our driving force for this program. But over the last 9 years, we've reached out to the community to provide education, awareness, and community resources for victims, survivors, and advocates. We use the expertise of our community to share information about the types of abuse, signs and symptoms, reporting, self-care, ways to keep yourself safe, prevention strategies, and the services of our community agencies. We've adopted one of the domestic violence shelters through giving them educational supplies, items that the families can use as they're transitioning, and even computers so that they can do some counseling. The pandemic has not stopped us, as we are currently presenting information through virtual webinars. As a community service organization, though, we always keep the statistics in front of us. And what I've been seeing is that currently Nevada ranks 5th in the nation for domestic violence fatalities. And at one point, we used to be #1 in the nation for 5 consecutive years. And so when we say whether we're 4th, 5th, or 3rd, whatever it is, it could be just the difference of 10 fatalities. But this is our community disease. And so there are statistics about the fact that 43.8% of Nevada women and 32.8% of Nevada men experience domestic violence in a lifetime. We look at children from homes with violence are more likely to experience significant psychological problems. Domestic violence in childhood is directly correlated with difficulties learning, lower IQ scores, deficiencies in visual motor skills, and problems with attention and memory. So as an organization, we strongly support this. This action can be the catalyst for change in our community to establish a sustainable funding force that is so badly needed to increase safety, independence, medical care, economic assistance, and other practical needs. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 177. If you'd like to provide support testimony, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 230. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. And then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hi, my name is Brittany Woodworth, Brittany Woodworth. I'm married here in the state of Nevada. I am completely in favor of domestic violence reform and us funding things. But I think taking double dipping out of the marriage licensing is completely incorrect. We already paid $25 out. And if you look at the marriage...
This sounds like testimony in opposition to the bill. We are currently in testimony in support of the bill.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Caller with the last 3 digits, 237. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and maybe.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Marlene Lockhart, representing the Nevada Women's Lobby. We are in support of SB 177, which will increase the marriage license fee to continue to provide funds for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. I would like to thank the bill sponsors, Senator Ratty, Cannizzaro, and Scheibel, for bringing this needed legislation forward. I would also like to extend a special thank you to former Lieutenant Governor Sue Wagner, who had the foresight to establish an assessment on the marriage license fee to fund domestic violence services in the state of Nevada. 40 years later, Sue Wagner's vision has had a profound impact on the lives of thousands of individuals by attaining the critical help and services needed to assist them through a very difficult period in their lives. You have heard the statistics. The need for this increased funding has been established, and now we need your support to continue to provide essential services to an ever-growing population. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 527. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am, we
Hello?
can hear you. We can hear you. Please proceed.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Hello, I'm Kimberly Fergus, and I would just like to say hello to the committee and everybody listening. Kimberly, Kimberly, Fergus, Fergus. I'm for this bill. It is a no-brainer. I mean, and it doesn't make marriage licenses look bad. I'm all for it. Everybody has said everything that my words there's nothing else I can come up with. Just really put it in committee and make it happen. Thank you for your time. God.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 887. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, Vice Chair Cannizzaro, and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Corey Solferino. It's C-O-R-E-Y, last of S as in Sam, O-L, F as in Frank, E-R-I-N-O, and I represent the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Senator Ratty and the other bill sponsors and stakeholders for their tireless efforts in carefully crafting this legislation. We encourage your support of SB 177. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give support testimony at this time.
All right, thank you. We will move on to testimony in opposition.
Thank you, Chair. If you'd like to provide opposition testimony on Senate Bill 177, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide opposition testimony on Senate Bill 177, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 500. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and maybe.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is Lynn Marie Goya, LYNN-MARIE-GOYA. I am the Clark County Clerk in Clark County, Nevada. I have submitted written testimony, and I would like to expand on that for this hearing. So in Clark County, the clerks oversee the Marriage License Bureau. In 2019, of the $3 million raised by the state to fund domestic violence prevention programs, $2.6 million came from Clark County, from our Marriage License Bureau. The remaining balance came from the other 16 counties, primarily from Washoe County. So 2 counties are the ones that are funding these programs. Clark works closely with the wedding industry and has been collaborating with various stakeholders to revive an industry that has been in decline for almost 20 years. In fact, many couples who come to Nevada do count their pennies. We've had couples come to the counter paying in quarters and nickels. The cost for a license is often, if with this new cost for a license, it might exceed the cost that they pay for their ceremonies. Marriages have been declining steadily since 2001, when 123,926 licenses were issued in Clark County. In 2019, Clark County issued 73,143 marriage licenses. That represents a 41% decline over the last 18 years, and of course, the decline in domestic violence prevention funds. Wedding tourism generates about $2 billion in economic activity in southern Nevada each year, supporting 18,000 jobs and hundreds of small businesses. In addition, it provides significant revenues to resort properties. Wedding couples and their guests represent approximately 1.7 million visitors each year. On average, each wedding generates approximately $27,000 of economic activity throughout the community. Every wedding we lose hurts all those individuals who rely on this industry to put food on their tables. We have been working diligently to reverse the 20-year decline in wedding tourism, and increasing the fee at this time would certainly suppress demand and kill the golden goose that so many lives depend upon. According to Jeremy Aguero of Applied Analysis, quote, the critical element for SB 177 is what share of the 1.7 million visitors would no longer come to Clark County because of the increased fee. Obviously, it would not be all of them. However, it will almost certainly be some of them. We would like to work closely with your committee to find an alternative source of income. As weddings decline, domestic violence prevention fees will also decline. So we would like to find an alternative source to make sure that a critical funding for domestic violence prevention programs remains stable. This may be the stake in the heart of the wedding industry and threatens the stability of your funding over the long term. I know the wedding industry would support this bill with an amendment on where the funding comes from. Now is the time to seek a secondary source for funding. It could include $1 or $2 fee on the DMV, which would generate over twice the income that you would get from the domestic wedding tourism.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Apologies, Chair. Thank you, caller. As a reminder, we are currently on opposition testimony on Senate Bill 177. If you'd like to provide opposition testimony, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And caller with the last three digits, 150. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Scheibel and all members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Maria Romano. It's M-A-R-I-A. Last name R-O-M-A-N-O. I'm here today. I wear two hats. I am founder of a small business in Las Vegas called True Love Knots, and I also represent the Government Affairs Committee for the Las Vegas Wedding Chamber of Commerce here in Las Vegas. And we respectfully want to submit our opposition to you on SB 177 before your committee with regards to an increase in the marriage license fees. For the record, we want to state we are not in any way opposed to additional state funding to help individuals who'd be assisted by the passage of this legislation. However, we feel the increase in fees would have a significant adverse impact upon the wedding industry. We are not imposed and in fact have supported previous increases in marriage license fees to help fund this worthy cause, and we're all behind this cause. But be as it may, at this particular time, we feel that an increase may not provide the revenue projected. The industry has been on a steady decline, as you heard, for over 20 years, and we experienced a 23% decrease last year, of course, due to COVID. And since weddings are not the only existing source of state funding for domestic violence prevention programs, a continued decline in the weddings will result in a continued decline in domestic violence prevention funds. Diversifying funding sources would stabilize funding for these critical services. This significant price increase in wedding licenses will inevitably garner national and potential international press. You know, we are still known as the wedding capital of the world. And the Wedding Chamber of Commerce has been working diligently with Clark County to reverse the trend of the decline in business. And we do see a potential turnaround in 2021. But this price increase might further delay the recovery. Preserving and rebuilding our industry is the best way to ensure that wedding licenses continue to be a significant source of revenue for domestic violence prevention programs. But if we can double our weddings, we'll double the funding for domestic violence prevention while providing income to thousands of constituents who depend upon the weddings for a living. And as we all know, the wedding industry has been devastated by this economic impact of COVID-19. Many businesses and chapels have closed because of this. You know, the governor had us closed for well over 3 months. And okay, well, we would consider you, please, to find other sources of funding for this bill, and we urge you not to increase the marriage license fees. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. If you've recently joined us this afternoon, we are currently on opposition testimony for Senate Bill 177. If you'd like to provide opposition testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 331. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
My name is Donnie Kerestic, D-O-N-N-E-K-E-R-E-S-T-I-C. I represent Chapel of Flowers and also Tropicana Hotel Weddings. I'm in opposition of the funding source for SB 177. I know there's comments made earlier that $25 is not a big deal to someone getting married, but it actually has had an impact for us in the past. For example, weddings flattened out in Clark County from 2013 to 2016 until the resort started charging $15 a day parking fee. And you see a direct correlation that drive-in states weddings declined 17, 18, and 19 from California, Arizona, Utah. So money does matter to some of these people. And like mentioned earlier, there's a good amount of weddings, tens of thousands of weddings that actually are cost less than $200 for someone to get married. It's not always a big celebration. A lot of times it's an intimate celebration, but it's also for legal reasons to get medical and healthcare and other benefits. I do believe there's other sources that we could tap into. My understanding, one of the biggest problems with domestic violence is unemployment, where they're stuck in the house with people, but also substance abuse. If we proposed and submitted a half a penny per ounce alcohol tax, just in Nevada alone, it would generate $51 million a year to go towards this cause. Resorts constantly charge $20 for a drink, so I think 6 cents more for a beer is well worth fighting for to help these people. The SB 177, only from what I've heard, only guarantees another 40 years of underserving the people who truly need it. $5 million is not enough to solve this problem. We need to solve and help everyone, not just some people. The other thing I'd like to point out is that over 2/3 of these marriages that happen are from people who don't live in Nevada. So when they come in to get married here, they really look at the overall cost, not only for themselves to come here and get married, the transportation, fuel, everything. And so it's something that needs to be taken into consideration. We will price ourselves out of a market, and I believe this puts Nevada at the highest marriage license in the country, if not the highest, one of the top 3. And people take that into consideration. That's all I have.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on opposition testimony for Senate Bill 177. And if you'd like to provide opposition testimony, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 200. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
My name is Cliff Everts, CLIFF-EVARTS. I'm the founder and CEO of Vegas Weddings. I agree with the comments of Senator Hansen and Senator Pickard. While we don't have any disagreement with the obvious needs to combat domestic abuse, and I have submitted my comments on the record, what we don't understand is why this very small wedding industry has been burdened with the sole responsibility to support 100% of the dedicated funds for this critical issue. Certainly, under a worst-case scenario, there is no cause and effect from getting married and domestic abuse. It would seem that a small tax on alcohol sales would be far more appropriate and would raise far more funds for domestic abuse. The wedding industry is barely surviving, and some believe that in 10 years there will not be a wedding industry. What we don't need is a nationwide publicity that Nevada has the highest marriage license fees in the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 230. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, my name is Brittany Woodworth. I'm a marriage officiant here in the state of Nevada. I oppose this bill only for a couple of reasons. It's not that I oppose domestic violence. I myself am a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. My perpetrator is a registered sexual whatever. And anyways, what I would like to say is I agree with everything Ms. Goya said and what your just previous speaker was, Mr. Cliff. Everything is now being put on the backs of the marriage industry while we are trying to get so back. We're nowhere. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put everything on. Brittany Woodworth, BRITTANYWOODWRTH. So what I want to say is I'm in opposition of this because it just goes against everything. We already paid $25, which I'm completely in favor of for domestic violence, but you need to find some other source of income. We are just now trying to come up out of the trenches for being shut down for so long and everything. Like everybody else that put $1 on state of Nevada registration or on something else. Not this. Please, work with us. We will work with you. We want help for domestic violence, but not all on our backs. We will now be the highest marriage license in the county. In the country. Please work with us. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give opposition testimony on SB 177 at this time.
Thank you so much. then we will move on to testimony in the neutral position on SB 177.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral standing on Senate Bill 177, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in neutral on SB 177, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to give neutral testimony.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody who has participated in this hearing. Are there any final comments or responses from the sponsor?
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. I appreciate the opportunity. First, I wanted to just see if Lieutenant Governor Wagner had any final comments for us. Lieutenant Governor, are you able to unmute? In the interest of time, I'll go ahead and just wrap us up here. Just a couple of things. First of all, I'm not without sympathy for the folks who are working in the wedding industry and understanding that we are in the hopefully tail end of a pandemic and what has been a very difficult year. So I did want to say that, and I wanted to say that we did start working on this bill long before March of last year because the need was steep and because we were preparing for this legislative session. And so I'm sympathetic to the industry in terms of the pandemic. And so I think we could have a conversation about the implementation date, when the bill would be effective, to give a little bit of space in between the tail end of the pandemic and the beginning of this new fee. I also appreciate that there's no fee that is the best fee. And the truth of the matter is, in the state of Nevada, where we have no income tax, where our property tax has lots of governors on it, the way we fund lots of critical services in the state of Nevada is through fees on activity. And all of the fees that have been suggested are in place now, and they're funding something else. So if we're talking about when you go to register your car at the DMV, that's the GST tax, and there's lots of critical programs, including our general fund and road building, that are paid for by that. You talk about many of the other suggestions, a tax on drinks. We already put significant taxes on drinks, and those go to fund some of our general fund and some of our substance abuse and substance treatment prevention and treatment programs. So, we can go down the list of everybody else who should be taxed or everybody else who should have a fee. And because of the reality of no income tax and a property tax system that has a lot of governors on it, people have been creative over the course of more than 40 years, and we've put a fee just about everything that you can put a fee on. As it turns out, I got information during the hearing that we've put a fee on divorces, and that fee currently goes to the Attorney General's office. It generates only about $60,000 to $70,000. So I guess the good news there is less people are getting divorced than getting married. So that's a highlight to end on, I suppose. But it's also true that while there was a wonderful time in our history where we did have a divorce tourism industry, we do not anymore. And I believe the number somewhere around 80% of the marriage licenses that we sell in the state of Nevada are sold to somebody who doesn't live in our state, because we do have a significant marriage tourism industry. So I will just end with saying that for many, many, many programs that we fund in the state of Nevada, I wish that they weren't dependent on some other person footing the bill. But everything that we do is dependent on some other person footing the bill. And this has been a tried and true source of funding for domestic violence and sexual violence for 40 years. And in 40 years, we have not found anything else. I am 100% open to finding something else if we can reach some consensus to get to a place of implementing something new. But the challenge is it has to be stable, steady, and it has to meet the need. So I would urge the members of the Senate Committee on Judiciary to take a hard look at this and to take a hard look at the reality of the need, which I think the advocates and particularly Crystal Miner did a fabulous job of explaining to you. I'm grateful to them for being here. I am grateful to Lieutenant Governor Wagner for spending her time with us and reminding us of the history, reminding us that in 40 years we haven't figured out something better. I hope that I pass one bill in my time in the legislature that will have the kind of legacy that this bill has had for domestic violence survivors. So with that, I urge you to take a hard look at the need, a hard look at the options, and vote yes on SB 177. Again, I'm Senator Julia Ratty, representing Senate District 13, and I'd appreciate your vote. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Senator Ratty, and everybody who has been here to present today and ask questions. I think you brought forth some very compelling testimony, and we appreciate your time. Things are always a little bit awkward on Zoom. You may go now, you may stay now. We will be moving on now as the hearing on SB 177 is officially closed. And that leads us to our hearing on the other bill on our agenda today, SB 108, which will also be presented by some very illustrious guests. We are joined by members of the Nevada Youth Legislature, and I will turn it over to them to tell us what order they're going to present in.
Thank you so much, Chair Scheibel. Good afternoon, members of the Senate Committee on Judiciary. For the record, I am Maiske representing Senate District 9. I currently serve as the chair of the Nevada Youth Legislature. With me today is Youth Legislator Juliana Melendez representing Senate District 10. She first proposed the Juvenile Justice measure, which we selected as our bill to be introduced during the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature. I am appearing before you primarily to share some background information about how the NYL selected this measure as its one statutory provided bill. Youth Legislator Melendez will walk you through the details of the bill. Before I explain the history of the NYL BDR, I would like to share my own personal history with discrimination and fear that it has created in my life. I was born in Ethiopia and I came to America when I was 2 years old. I'm the proud child of two hardworking immigrant parents who immigrated halfway across the world to ensure a better life. Unfortunately, they were unaware that the dream of a better life America sold came with a package deal of systemic oppression. The first memory I have of being exposed to society's true colors was after the death of Trayvon Martin. It was just 2 days after my 9th birthday when I noticed my mom's eyes were bloodshot red and Niagara Falls was rolling down her cheeks. She pointed at our television and explained to me that an innocent 17-year-old African American was murdered. From that day on, I began to see the world for what it truly was. My heart filled with fear every time my father stepped outside the house. I transitioned to fearing the police rather than feeling protected by them. Being in a position to obtain justice for anyone who has lost their life due to police brutality and preventing younger generations from fearing the police has steered me towards law. For that reason, I seized the opportunity to become a Nevada Youth Legislator. This bill gives the youth the opportunity to live life without the fear of being victimized due to implicit bias. Senate Bill 108 is significant because it requires any criminal justice employee to complete implicit bias and cultural competency training, which is highly crucial in a world where systemic racism is normalized and bias is inevitable. Any action that can be taken to reduce implicit bias and work towards a more educated group of employees will overall reduce the fear and stigma that is associated with the juvenile justice system. The bill that the NYL chose is one that we are very confident that will improve the quality of life for the youth in Nevada. Thank you greatly, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee for listening and considering Senate Bill 108. Again, Before Youth Legislator Melendez explains the NYL bill, our intentions with the bill, with the measure, and the benefits that it will deliver, I would like to describe how we, as the Nevada Youth Legislature, chose Senate Bill 108 for introduction. On September 2nd, 2020, all 18 youth legislators participated in a comprehensive midterm training on BDR development. We learned about drafting language, fiscal impacts, advocacy, and much more. Prior to our next meeting and training, all 18 youth legislators submitted their individual ideas for the NYL's one statutorily provided bill. During the October 13th meeting, each youth legislator presented his or her proposal and answered questions posed by their NYL colleagues. During that meeting, we started with 18 measures, then narrowed our choices down to 7. Then the top 2 BDRs for further consideration at our November meeting. Of those two BDRs, one focused on mental health screenings for school-aged children, and the other addressed discriminatory inequalities in the juvenile justice system. By the time we came together for our November 19th meeting, youth legislators were eager to learn more about those 2 remaining BDRs during full legislative hearings, with 5 expert witnesses for each measure. After comprehensive testimonies and careful Q&A with these witnesses, the NYL selected Juvenile Justice BDR proposed by Youth Legislator Melendez. In January 2021, the NYL met to refine the bill. During our meeting, we worked with the legal division to clarify any questions or concerns and fine-tune the language. Senate Bill 108 was introduced in Senate on February 9th of 2021. Since the introduction of Senate Bill 108, we have heard from several interested parties who have offered suggestions for refining the language of the bill. Unfortunately, the NYL has not had the opportunity to discuss or vote on anything beyond what is included in Senate Bill 108. Therefore, neither Youth Legislator Melendez nor I will be able to take the position on behalf of the NYL on any proposed changes. However, we can provide committee members with the perspective of how the NYL discussed and proposed Senate Bill 108. This includes the ideas and concerns that youth legislators shared during decision-making and language development of this bill. In addition to this, Youth Legislator Melendez and I can answer any questions and share input as individual youth legislators. It is now, again, with privilege that I introduce Youth Legislator Melendez to help you better understand the need for Senate Bill 108 and why this NYL proposed legislative measure powerfully addresses our concerns about discriminatory inequities in the juvenile justice system. Following Youth Legislator Melendez's presentation, each of us looks forward to answering any questions that the members of the committee might have. Again, thank you so much, Chair Scheibel and members of the Judiciary Senate Committee.
For the record, I am Youth Legislator Juliana Melendez, representing Senate District 10. I appear before you today as the original sponsor of the BDR selected by the Nevada Youth Legislature as its 2021 legislative measure, SB 108. I thank you for this opportunity to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee today. We are all here because we care about the future of Nevada, whether we have children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, or our youth ourselves. We have a personal responsibility to protect those who will continue our legacy. In order to fully carry out this duty of protection, we cannot ignore the fact that minority youth are amongst the most vulnerable within our communities, and that this vulnerability leaves them open to discrimination, based solely upon their race. This is extremely prevalent within our juvenile justice system. Nevada had the 6th highest rate of student arrests in the nation during the 2015 to 2016 school year, and within the last 3 years, Black youth accounted for 43% of police referrals, while only making up 17% of the student body. In Clark County specifically, Black and brown youths make up 76% of all juvenile cases referred to the district attorney's office. I will be providing a printed copy of these statistics and more for review prior to the committee's work session. The two major components of SB 108 that seek to address these alarming statistics are the mandatory racial.
Sorry, Representative Melendez, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm hearing that we are having some trouble hearing you. If you could move a little bit closer to your microphone and make sure that you speak up, please.
Yes. Does this sound better? Oh,
I think so.
So sorry about that.
That's okay.
The two major components of SB 108 that seek to address these alarming statistics are the mandatory racial and cultural competency trainings for all workers in the criminal justice system who come into contact with juveniles, as well as the requirement for an affidavit to be signed by anyone who files a court petition against a juvenile, certifying that the petition was not filed due to any type of discrimination. I completely understand that the state budget is tight at the moment due to the pandemic, which is why I'd like to offer some insight into how this bill could be implemented with as little cost as possible. An example of a concept comparable to SB 108 that was successfully implemented in Nevada is restorative justice. So during the last legislative session, as you may already know, community organizations advocated and provided the framework for restorative justice within schools, and therefore insisted in the implementation of it. By having organizations provide the framework and work with school social workers, the restorative justice trainings became characteristically pro bono. Some specific community organizations that would help with funding and or provide free trainings needed for the bill's successful implementation are the NAACP and ACLU. Another suggestion that was made at one of the recent NYL meetings was to collaborate with the State Bar of Nevada, who already requires attorneys to take certain trainings on a yearly basis. By collaborating with them, we would be able to have the trainings mandated in SB 108 possibly required by the State Bar, which would help with any possible costs. Grants from the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention are also a possibility, given the necessity for the assistance of external organizations in assisting the state to implement the bill, should it pass. Lastly, the state of Nevada spends 2.7 times as much per prisoner as per public school student, and with less students in the juvenile justice system, we can allocate these funds towards community needs, such as education, or again, any possible costs this bill may incur. In today's political climate, it is urgent more so now than ever to address the inequality faced by minority youth within the Nevada juvenile justice system. I personally have friends who have been targeted by school police and treated differently compared to their white counterparts, specifically because of the color of their skin. This firsthand experience of racial discrimination against my peers, as well as the recent uproar worldwide concerning racism and ethnic disparities, are what inspired me to create this bill. At one of our last NYL meetings, a student actually shared her encounter with an LVMPD officer who accused her of being involved with crime simply because she was Black. We cannot allow instances like these to keep occurring in Nevada. By supporting SB 108, we are able to prevent thousands of our youth from ending up in a system that leaves them psychologically, physically, and mentally traumatized. Juvenile incarceration can also contribute to the higher rates of fatal drug overdose, suicide, and post-traumatic stress later on in life. While I understand that school districts and police departments have the best interests of students in mind, the recent deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks clearly illustrate the potential dangers of police interactions, and that is why we need to be the first to address this undercover pandemic of racial disparities in our juvenile justice system. Let's not wait 10 years to pass so that we can try and help those whose incarceration we should have prevented. Let us take action for our youth today, not tomorrow. Once again, thank you to the committee for this opportunity. I welcome any and all questions the committee may have for me or Chair Haley Maiske.
Thank you so much, Representatives Haley Maiske and Melendez. With that, we will move to questions from members of the committee. Do we have any questions from committee members? Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you, Chair. And I I guess more of a comment, if it's okay with you, Chair. I want to compliment the youth legislators on this excellent work. I appreciate what you're trying to accomplish here, and compliment Ms. Ashdown and Senator Wiener. Senator Wiener's former chair of this Judiciary Committee, and appreciate your hard work on this legislation. So thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Absolutely. Senator Harris, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, and thank you both for bringing the bill and for doing such a great job and being prepared to present to us today. I had a question about, I guess, the experience amongst your peers. So I believe you mentioned that, one person in the youth legislature shared a story. One colleague that you have in school had an experience. Would you say that these are fairly common, or is it just these kind of one-offs?
Youth Legislator Mendez, okay. Thank you, Senator Harris, for your question, and Chair Scheibel, if I may, through you to Senator Harris.
Sure, you can answer directly to Senator Harris.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Harris, for your question. The person who witnessed was actually my very close friend, and she experienced her experience with racism and just being discriminated against. And actually, at the time, I was there with her, and being that the experience that we had was with both a police officer and a detective. It was a part of many people from different positions. I do not believe that it is just a one-off, being that I'm only 18 and I have already been discriminated against with my friends. I don't believe that it's a one-off simply because it wasn't just a police officer or just a detective. It was kind of everybody that was in that predicament with us. And I do not believe that it is purposeful, but even on accident, I believe that implicit bias is something that most people cannot avoid. Thank you.
All right, are there questions from other members of the committee? I would like to ask both of you whether these organizations, the District Attorneys Association or the Supreme Court or the Attorney General's office reached out to you before the hearing about their proposed amendments. And if so, whether you're still in conversation with them. I understand that the amendments would have to go to a vote of the entire youth legislature and you can't speak for everybody in the youth legislature. I'm just trying to get a sense for whether you're in the process of working with those organizations or not.
Chair, if I may answer that. We have spoken to those organizations on multiple occasions, both myself and Chair Haley Maiske, along with Senator Wiener and other staff, through phone calls, email conversations, and I personally have been able to view the amendments. They are not something that, again, we haven't been able to discuss with the entire body of the Nevada Youth Legislature. I do consider them friendly amendments. We've never discussed referencing some of those amendments that suggest striking out completely section 2 of the bill, which discusses the affidavit. That we have not discussed whatsoever because those amendments are quite new to us. But the other language that has been proposed, such as instead of criminal justice system, it would be those who work specifically in the juvenile justice system. That is something that we originally intended to have within the bill. We discussed with Nevada Youth Legislature. We did want the bill to focus specifically on the juvenile justice system. So some of those amendments have been discussed, but the one about striking out section 2 has not been discussed.
Okay. And what about the agencies that submitted fiscal notes? Have you contacted or met with all of those agencies?
I personally, on my own time, have looked through the fiscal notes that they submitted, but as a body, the Nevada Youth Legislature has not discussed, reviewed, or spoken to anybody that has submitted a fiscal note.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we will move to testimony in support of SB 108.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 108, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on SB 108, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 725. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, my name is Nick Shepak, Nickshepak, Policy and Program Associate with the ACLU of Nevada. We want to thank the Youth Legislature for bringing forth this amazing bill and for including us in some of the preliminary talks earlier before this session. We are here in support of SB 108 as introduced. While Section 2 may need some work, we must start building in accountability measures into our reform legislation. Regardless of any conscious desire to be fair or assertion of the absence of racist intent, unconscious bias is present. Each of us has bias that impacts the way we move through our world, whether we are students in school, police officers in the street, or staff members of the ACLU. It is our responsibility, and particularly that of white people, to acknowledge our racist past and present and work to address our own biases in order to move towards a truly anti-racist future. A study published in July found that in the last 3 years, Black students accounted for more than 33% of police referrals in Clark County, meaning arrests or citations, while representing about 14% of the student body. According to the most recent governor's annual report on juvenile justice, which was prepared in January 2019, 36% of youth held in confinement were Black and only 24% were white. These numbers vary significantly from the total population of our state, in which 38% of youth are white and only 10% are Black. The over-criminalization of Black youth damages our communities and jeopardizes the success of our children. This issue is a systemic and very real one here in the state. Implicit bias training alone will not fix this problem, but is a necessary part of the solution. We urge this committee to support and pass SB 108 with some sort of accountability measure intact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 108. If you'd like to provide support testimony, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 130. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS, and I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada in support of Senate Bill 108. I first want to thank the Nevada Youth Legislature for proposing this important legislation and for their inspiring testimony this afternoon. It is well documented that systemic racism is prevalent throughout the criminal justice system, the over-policing and mass incarceration of communities of color. According to the Vera Institute of Justice, Black people are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate of 5.1 times greater than that of white people. They explain that these racial disparities in the criminal justice system are no accident, but rather rooted in the history of oppression and discriminatory decision-making that have deliberately targeted Black people and helped create an inaccurate picture of crime that deceptively links them with criminality. Implicit bias training is an important first step to exposing the systemic racism in the criminal justice system, and we urge you to support Senate Bill 108. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 611. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is John Piro, Johnpiro, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Clark County Public Defender's Office and the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. I'd like to thank the Nevada Youth Legislature for bringing forward this important bill. Rooting out implicit bias in our criminal justice system is one of the great tasks of our lifetime. And I'm very proud that the children are leading the way on this. The thing about implicit bias is that it creeps up on you, and it needs to be examined in each one of us. And it is high time that we reckon with this. Even if we think we don't have a bias, it's something that we need to look at closely and examine regularly to make sure that we are making decisions for the right reasons. This goes through the whole criminal justice system, from arrest to prosecution to defense to the judges. And I thank the Nevada Youth Legislature for putting this bill in front of you, the committee, and I ask that you please pass this bill so that we can start moving forward in a more thoughtful way. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give support testimony at this time.
Thank you, Broadcasting. And Chair Scheibel had to briefly step out of the meeting, hoping she might be able to return. But Broadcasting, if we could now go to opposition. Anyone who wants to speak in opposition to the measure.
Thank you, Senator Orenshaw. If you'd like to provide opposition testimony on Senate Bill 108, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide opposition testimony on 108, Senate Bill 108, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 663, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair or Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is John McCormick, John, last name McCormick. And I'm the Assistant Court Administrator at the Supreme Court. Today I have the unenviable task of calling in opposed due to the rules in place. And as you know, we have proposed an amendment that is available on Nellis. First, I want to put on record that the judicial branch certainly appreciates the work of the Nevada Youth Legislature and that we are in no way opposed to the concept of providing quality training on cultural competency and bias to judges, masters, and their staff. Our concerns with the bill primarily revolve around separation of powers concerns in terms of subjecting the judicial branch to regulations to be promulgated by the executive branch. And we also have a small concern with primarily subsection 2 in section 2, but we are committed to working with the sponsors and advocates for this bill in any way we can to help them move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick, and I appreciate you and the Judiciary's willingness to work with the youth legislators, Ms. Ashdown and Senator Wiener, and hopefully there's some common ground that can be found. Broadcasting, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to the measure?
Yes, thank you, Senator Orenshaw. Caller with the last three digits, 229, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and maybe.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Orenshaw and Committee. Jamie Rodriguez, JamieRodriguez, representing Washoe County. I very much so, I'm sorry to have to be here in opposition to this bill. We think policy-wise, it's a very sound and really good bill. And something that we are very much so supportive of. I am here today, unfortunately, in opposition, really regarding concerns of the fiscal impact from the legislation, and happy to try to work with the sponsors on that. I will say, I think our largest concern, we support the training and what have you, but to get the number of individuals that this bill addresses the training and having that done in 6 months or so, to meet the implementation date of January 1, of 2022, is very much so concerning for us. So hoping that we can maybe work on that. I know there's some other amendments, as Mr. McCormick mentioned, and there's one from the Clark County DA, which does help limit that. But again, I think just the policy we think is very sound and very supportive of, but the fiscal impact to us meeting that implementation deadline is concerning. And so for that reason, we are opposed.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. And again, as I said with Mr. McCormick, I hope Washoe County will reach out to the youth legislators, Senator Wiener, Ms. Ashtown, and try to find common ground.
Thank you, Senator Orangel. Caller with the last 3 digits, 882. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and maybe.
Hi, good afternoon. I think maybe Vice Chair Kenneth Arthur, I can't see the video, but this is Bridget Duffy, BRIGID DUFFY, Chief of the Juvenile Division for the Clark County DA's Office, appearing on the Nevada District Attorneys Association this afternoon. And like my others in opposition, I am sorry that I, by rule or protocol, am appearing in opposition today. I had the pleasure of working and appearing at the November 19th Nevada Youth Legislators meeting when this bill, this concept of a BDR was put forth to bring to you today. I hear and I understand the voices of our youth. It is one of the most powerful voices that I hear, and it always inspires me. And that's why I co-chair our school justice partnership in Clark County to break that school to prison pipeline, and why I sit on the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission's Racial and Ethnic Disparities Committee. I have submitted for consideration, and I did have a chance to spend, I think, over an hour one afternoon with Youth Legislator Melendez and Senator Wiener to discuss some concerns that the District Attorneys Association had. One being that I don't think the intent of their bill would even be met if it continued to say criminal justice system in Section 1. So I wanted to make clear that we were applying it to the juvenile justice system because I think that is very important. Second, as part of the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission's Racial and Ethnic Disparities, we had a great survey done, and Chief Spratley from the Sheriff's and Chiefs Association helped us get it out to all law enforcement partners across the state, from the largest as of Metro and Highway Patrol and Washoe County and our rural partners, to find out what training they actually already provide. That survey was fantastic. And one of the things we know is that by peace officer training standards, there is some standard of implicit bias training and cultural competencies already happening across our state. But one of the things that I noticed was missing, or we noticed as a committee was missing, is there's really no true juvenile training. When you ask the chiefs and sheriffs what type of training they get around juveniles, it's around juvenile law, right? So we teach them what adjudication is, and we teach them, what juvenile law is, but we do not teach them what an adverse childhood experience is or what an impact of trauma is on a child's decision-making and behaviors. And I think I wanted to take the opportunity to help build something that was really meaningful with this amazing piece of legislation, because when you look at even the percentage of the racial and ethnic background and its disproportionality in the juvenile justice and criminal justice system, more importantly, or as importantly, you have to look at the percentage of our children with multiple adverse childhood experiences and levels of complex trauma that are coming in. And if we as partners who deal with children every day do not understand how that can impact a child's decision-making and their behaviors, I don't think that it's really gonna make a big impact on the system until we do. I've had the pleasure of making sure all of my DAs are trained in implicit bias and adverse childhood experiences through a great training put on by the Clark County Department of Juvenile Justice Services. As to Section 2, we are in complete opposition to signing an affidavit saying that we didn't file something out of racism, or I think there are better ways to address that. We in the state of Nevada, or at least have specialized juvenile prosecutors. Other states use it as a training ground. They split prosecutors, even public defenders. I am so proud that the state of Nevada doesn't do that. I mean, my prosecutors are career prosecutors for juveniles. And so
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Duffy, but
I understand, but I'll continue to work. I could talk forever. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. And again, I'd encourage you to if you'd keep open the lines of conversation with youth legislators, Senator Wiener, and with Ms. Ashdown, and hopefully there's some common ground. Thank you, Ms. Duffy. Broadcasting, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition?
And thank you, Senator Orenshaw. At this time, there are no more callers to give opposition testimony.
Thank you, Broadcasting. And neutral, is there anyone who wishes to be heard in the neutral position on this measure?
Thank you, Senator. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 108, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 108, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Senator Orenshaw, the phone lines are open and working. However, there are no callers to give neutral testimony at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. And I believe our Vice Chair is back, so I will pass, or our Chair is back. I'll pass the virtual gavel back to Chair Scheibel.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking care of this committee in my absence. I know you did a wonderful job. I already know that. And I believe that that was the end of neutral testimony. Do the sponsors of the bill have any closing remarks, responses, or comments you want to make?
Chair Haley-Miskell, for the Youth Legislator Maiske Haley-Miskell, for the record. Thank you, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I would just like to finish off by saying I strongly urge the Senate Judiciary Committee to support the Senate Bill 108, as it is an immense move forward towards ensuring a brighter future for the youth in Nevada by taking steps towards protecting their rights and decreasing implicit bias in the juvenile justice system. I would also like to add that I sympathize with anyone that has any concerns with fiscal impacts with this measure may bring, and Youth Legislator Melendez and I, as well as everyone who is in support of this bill, are willing to work with anyone, especially with the implication date, to decrease the fiscal impact. And I would just like to say that I do believe that taking steps forward towards reducing implicit bias and ending systemic racism is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And please, Senator Wiener.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What a delight and I appreciate, this is Senator Valerie Wiener, retired Chair of the Nevada Youth Legislature Board. And I just want to take a moment to thank our youth legislators for stepping up as voices of the entire program. Also, just to add for the record, if I may, we're willing to work with the parties who have voiced concerns. Our young people are extraordinarily bright and insightful and eager. And that segues to, from the chair, I believe has the names of youth legislators who have provided written testimony. This is the first time we've ever done that. And I thought that maybe she could name those youth legislators who have taken the time to provide written testimony for the Senate Judiciary Committee record as a first step in their experience in this process of committee hearing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That would be fantastic. I am looking at the exhibits for this meeting right now, just so that everybody can follow along, and it looks like those letters were uploaded to Nellis. So please go ahead, Chair Haley-Miskell.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. And for the record, it is Chair Maiske Haley-Miskell. And the youth legislators who are also participating as observers online who have provided testimonies are Youth Legislator Mahadot Abebe, who represents Senate District 11, Youth Legislator Chindu, who represents Senate District 3, Youth Legislator Devoran from Senate District 13, Youth Legislator Espinoza de los Montores, who represents Senate District 14, Youth Legislator Alexander Wong, who represents Senate District 8, and District Youth Advisory Council members Lauren Lauren Wong, who represents Senate District 8. Thank you again, Chair Scheibel and the members for giving us the opportunity to present Senate Bill 108. And yeah, thank you guys so much. And I hope you really consider this bill.
Thank you for taking the time to present to us and answering all of our questions. And we look forward to working with you throughout this process. With that, I will close the hearing on SB 108. That takes us to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. Mr. Kyle, could you please see if there's anybody here to give public comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Scheib. If you'd like to provide public comment this afternoon, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 666. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and maybe.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, members of the committee. Warren Hardy, W-A-R-R-E-N, Hardy, H-A-R-D-Y. I apologize. I thought I was signed in to speak on the bill, and I assure you, Madam Chair, it was something I did wrong on my end, but I was not able to speak on the bill. I just wanted to let the committee know, and especially my friend and former colleague Senator Wiener, that I'm representing the urban consortium made up of Las Vegas, Henderson, Reno, and Sparks. And we do have some concerns with the bill that have already been articulated. I look forward to working with them on this issue, and appreciate the youth legislators for bringing this forward. I remember when Senator Wiener brought this whole concept forward, and it's exciting to see it progress to this point. So we really look forward. And Madam Chair, thank you for accommodating me, even though I don't know how to work my phone. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And caller with the last 3 digits, 556. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, A-N-N-E-M-A-R-I-E, G-R-A-N-T. My brother Thomas Purdy was 38 years old when he was hogtied by Reno police during a mental health crisis for 40 plus minutes and then dumped at Washoe County Jail, still hogtied to be put prone while hogtied, face down, and 4 deputies got on my 140-pound soaking wet brother and asphyxiated him to death. Today, I'd like to talk about another asphyxiation death at the hands of Reno police. This letter was written by Denise Abbey, the mother of Micah Abbey, who was 33 years old when he lost his life to Reno police, 12/25/2011. He was in a group home for mentally disabled folks. He got into a verbal argument at dinner time with a peer staff called RPD. By the time RPD officers Keith Pike, Daniel Bond, Scott Rasmussen, and Brad D. Metropolis arrived, Micah was resting peaceful and calmly in his bedroom by himself, sitting on his bed. Micah did attempt to avoid being handcuffed on Christmas Day. Of course, he didn't want to go to jail for a verbal argument. The police tased him 22 times, of which 12 of those he was handcuffed and face down with officers on his neck and back. They also hogtied Micah like Reno PD did to Thomas Purdy. They used a baton on him as well. He never made it out of his room alive. I personally know Micah's family and so many others living this nightmare when your loved one is killed without consequence by police. Christmas is a dreaded day for Denise. She worked in a mental health hospital for years, and they did not kill a single person at the mental health hospital in crisis. Truth be told, the only community member to die at a mental facility was Ronald Leach, who was a patient shot in the parking lot of the mental hospital by Reno police. Please do not support bills that further protect police. Please support bills that promote transparency and accountability. My family and so many other families are hurting and counting on you folks. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, if you've recently joined, we are currently on public comment this afternoon for Senate Judiciary Committee. If you'd like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair Scheibel, the phone lines are open and working. However, there are no more callers to give public comment at this time.
All right, thank you so much for your help, Mr. Kyle. That concludes today's meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Thank you again to our youth legislators, Senator Wiener, Ms. Ashdown, and everybody else who came to join us today. And we will reconvene tomorrow. We are adjourned.